ask excellent questions. At the end of the session, we can all get together and scare the hell out of the other rooms by doing an evil laugh. What do you think about that? Since this is the dark characters panel, don't you think that would be a good idea? But if we're going to do this, you can't do it halfway. You got to really go for it. Are we in agreement? Okay, great. So we'll go into that. My name is Ben Wolf. Thank you so much for coming to the Dark Characters panel. The reason Craig asked me to do this is because I had an opportunity to co-write with him, and as I was doing sort of the initial couple chapters, he got back to me and said, Ben, your writing is too dark. I don't like it. The audience, it's the wrong audience. You're going to turn off my readers, so I just can't do it. And then he fired me. But he gave me this panel instead, so at least I got something out of it, right? So we are having a few technical difficulties with some of the other microphones, so please bear with us. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and let the other panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to dive right in. I hope you have lots of questions, because I could only come up with 3.
First of all, thanks everybody for coming and spending your time. I feel like time is one of the most valuable resources we have. So it means a lot that you guys would be able to come here and interact with us. My name is Jonathan Yanez. I started writing urban fantasy, went to sci-fi, and now I'm doing both. I've been writing for about 9.5 years now.
Hi, I'm Kimbra Swain. I've been writing for about 4 years, and I write urban fantasy, and I just recently released my first paranormal romance.
Hello, I am Kate Pickford. I write under a bunch of pen names. At the moment, I am writing post-apoc under J.J. Pike for Muonic Press, and I am writing steamy rom-coms, which of course have many, many villains.
Excellent. Okay, and I'm Ben Wolf. I write dark stuff, as I have already made clear, sci-fi, horror, fantasy, and children's books. So I'm all over the map. It is pretty terrifying, yes. I should not be trusted. Not just with children's books, but in general. All right, so let's kick this off. Panel, who is your favorite dark character right now in popular media, and why?
I'm a big fan of Magneto from the X-Men universe, and I feel like I like Magneto because I understand him, and like a little bit of me thinks like, man, maybe he's not that wrong. You know, he's just trying to protect mutants, his people. Maybe he's not that bad. So I feel like for me, really great villains, like you at least understand where they're coming from, and maybe even a little part of you agrees with them.
Right now, my favorite is Lucifer from the Netflix show, and I love it just because he's not good looking at all. I also lie. But no, I love the idea that, you know, the devil's tired of running hell and he wants to come up and mess with the humans. And there's just a lot of dynamic there and conflict, and I think it really exploits that, and that's why I love Lucifer.
So I don't really do anything with popular culture, so this is a really hard one for me. I'm lying. So one of the things that I think is really important is that what constitutes a dark character really depends on your genre. But there is always going to be, if you're writing a modern novel, there is always going to be an antagonist. And if you set up your protagonist and your antagonist properly, no matter what your antagonist is, they are the dark character to your protagonist. And so I would say currently my favorite is, I'm a Janeite, so I've watched everything that has ever been adapted from any kind of Jane, and I want to talk about Regency drama. And Mr. Collins is one, see, nobody knows what I'm talking about. People back at home knows what I'm talking about. So Mr. Collins gets written a couple of different ways, right? In the 1995 version, which is really the benchmark for how this particular dark character is written. He's somebody who gives his power away all the time to Lady Catherine de Bourgh. He has no personal agency, and there are reasons that we hate him, and we put him in that character. It's not only because the estate is entailed away to him, but because of how he deals with power and how he treats the women around him. But the absolute best version of Mr. Collins, if you haven't seen this, I don't care what you watch, you must watch this. Lost in Austin has got, yay, no, okay. Lost in Austin is, it's one of these dual timeline things where somebody from the present walks through the portal and ends up in Elizabeth Bennet's house. And Mr. Collins turns up, and he's a crotch sniffer. So oh my God, you'll love him. You never actually see the shot because it's Regency, you just see. Best dark character ever.
I should also note that I invited Kate here specifically for her perspective. For me, I struggled with this even as I was writing the question, but for me, it's Loki from the Marvel series. Also, he's not good looking at all, but I like his evolution as a character, because in the first couple movies, he's absolutely horrible. He's very mischievous, and if any of you have seen the recent show, Loki, you can really see how he's really just made an incredible journey just as a character, but he came from a really, really dark place, so that was really appealing to me. So the next question is, who is your favorite dark character in your own writings, and why? So we'll start with Kate again, since that was such a blockbuster.
So if you read Post-Apoc, the series that I currently have out is called Melt. It is about a plastic-eating enzyme that was supposed to get rid of plastic for us, but it gets accelerated and it gets released into the world, and now everything is melting. Everything that has any plastic in it is melting. In Post-Apoc, your villain can be the apocalypse. So you can have something that is the environmental thing that brings pressure to your characters. But for our readership, they really do like your villain to be a human being, because it's very, very character-driven. Even though Post-Apoc looks like it's plot-driven, it looks like chase the cat up the tree, keep throwing rocks. In fact, it's about how the characters respond. So in that plot-story divide, plot being what happens and story being how the characters respond to what happens, how they respond really matters. And Post-Apoc is very, very much about the resiliency of the human spirit, which means if you send someone in to raid whatever stores people have built up for themselves, they are going to be the villains. Of course, in their own mind, they are not the villains. I am a big fan of the red herring. So I have an agent who works for MI6 who is written as this extraordinarily arrogant, know-it-all fuck who everybody hates. I'm not going to tell you whether or not that is the red herring, except I just told you. Damn. But it turns out that there is somebody else who is the villain. But you want, in my universe, you want to keep your readers guessing about who is making all of this happen. And at some point in Post-Apoc, it actually doesn't matter who made this happen. What matters is how we now deal with it and the people around us. Do they bring their best selves or not?
I was trying to decide who to pick in mind, but I think I'll go with, I have a character named Tennyson who is a mob boss, and his history is he is Lancelot, and from the Arthurian legends, and what happens is my Arthur becomes Oberon, and Guinevere is punished for her infidelity and kind of cursed, and so she is dragged out of his life, and he's cursed to live in the human world, and he's just in a really, really dark place, and so he walks away from Camelot when it falls apart and just starts doing things for his own reasons, and he builds this huge empire just being a terrible person. And when he comes back around in my series, they're actually all very afraid of him because he's Fey, and he is, so he has power, but he also has this power in the human world. And so it makes all the humans cringe at him and all the Fae cringe at him. But so I really, really liked playing into his despair of just walking away from everything he thought he had, his best friend and the woman that he loved.
So I'll use Ben's example of Loki. I always try to make the distinguishing difference between bad characters and evil characters. Because I really like Loki's storyline. Like what you're saying, like there's redemption. I feel like for bad characters, it can be redemption. But I feel like also you need that evil character who like nothing's going to bring that person back. So in my series, I do fallen angels. So Typhon is my fallen angel, and I like when I outline, I just put key characteristics, and it really helps me putting like an actor or actress's face next to that character, so I kind of understand what they look like. So it's Benjamin Cumberbatch. So Doctor Strange is my villain. So that's what I picture in my mind, like super suave and well spoken. But when he snaps, you get to see this dark side of him, and you understand, like, oh, it's all a facade.
I mentioned I write sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. I'm going to choose a character from my fantasy series. His name is Meta, and he is an assassin who was raised in a cult, basically a death cult, from the time that he was very, very small. He was abducted from his family. His parents were killed. You know, typical fantasy stuff. And his story is very much one of redemption, because at a certain point, early on in his story, he realizes that he cannot stop killing. He has a taste for it now, and literally anything he sees, anyone he sees, he has an incredible impulse to kill them, because that's how corrupted his mind has become from living in this death cult his entire life. Come to find out that the death cult is fully prepared for this, because this happens to pretty much all of the people that they train up, and then they try to kill him, and it does not go well. I won't give you too many spoilers, but suffice it to say, he is forced to make a lot of choices that he doesn't want to make, and other people get drawn into his conflict against the death cult that is trying to kill him. It's pretty fun, pretty violent, a lot of cool action. It's on Amazon. You can go pick it up anytime you want. Okay, next question. Now we're actually going to move into talking about what makes dark characters dark. And so my next question is, what is one element, just one, that you guys would say is essential in the creation of dark characters, and why? Kimbra? We're not going to start with you. We'll start with Jonathan.
That's like a Survivor episode where they're like, no, this is not you. It's the other person kicked off the island. That's what it felt like. One essential thing from dark characters, I feel like you always have to like think of like what's driving them, what's their motivation. So they have something that they're putting in front of anybody else. Either be like people's lives don't matter to them as much as this one thing does. So whether it's power or if it's money, it's whatever drives them, and they're willing to sacrifice anything else along the way to get it.
So I'm going through my head because yesterday I did character building in urban fantasy, so I should know this, right? And motivation is one of the things. I think another thing is empathy. It's very important to be able to relate to the character, even though they're bad, even though they're evil. You need to be able to convey to the reader why they're doing what they're doing. And I say when you do empathy, the why, or even with motivation, the why isn't the surface why. Ask why 5 times. They're upset because so-and-so died. Well, why are they upset about that? Well, because they loved them and they didn't want to love, now they have problems, caring about anybody else. Why? And then just dig deeper into that. And the deeper you dig, the more empathy you build for that character for your readers.
He said one thing. God, it's so unfair. So I think that any of you who have read Lisa Cron's story Genius will know about the idea of the misbelief. And she uses misbelief rather than the fatal flaw or the wound, if you're going back to Greek tragedy, because it sounds less judgy, and because everybody has misbelief. If you want to dig into misbelief, I would recommend Angela Ackerman's The Emotional Wound Thesaurus, which is fantastic. And they just came out with a conflict thesaurus, which is really great. And if you're looking at dark characters, you know, the idea that light and dark only exist because they both exist, you need both for each of them to exist. You can either have dark characters that are the polar opposite of your protagonist, your light character, or you can have one that is really, really closely aligned with your main protagonist. So putting the author aside because they are quite problematic, just looking at the work. If you look at Harry Potter, for example, our main protagonist has a wand that's made from phoenix, that has got feathers from a certain phoenix, and so does the antagonist from the same source. They both speak parcel tongue. They are both orphans. If you look at the parallels that she has built, they are, in a really, really deep sense, the same person that has been split and gone down different paths. So I would say the most important thing that you have got to get for your dark characters is to nail their misbelief to the wall.
One of the things I like to play with in my stories, especially when it comes to dark characters, is the element of mystery as it pertains to these characters. And I think that keeping a dark character kind of in the shadows for most of the story can be a really effective way of creating a sense of foreboding throughout your book. If any of you ever saw the TV show Heroes on NBC a while back, that was 10, 15 years ago, there was a character on there played by Zachary Quinto, who is also not good looking. And he played a character by the name of Sylar. And Sylar was this just a serial killer who was going after other people with powers. And for the first several episodes, you only got glimpses of him. And whenever you did, his face was always kind of covered. You always saw his silhouette. Or you would see the aftermath of what he had done to these other heroes. And it was always horrific. He would kill them in horrible, horrible ways because, as it would turn out, spoiler alert, 15 years later, he was stealing their powers. But I think the one mistake that Heroes made, and I get why they did it, was they gave him his own origin story episode. And from that point on, he wasn't scary to me. I understood him, I empathized with him, I got it, I understood it, but he wasn't scary anymore. And it's TV, and so the rules are different, so I understand why they wanted to flesh out his character because it was a really interesting character, and obviously he did a great job with it. But I think that had they kept that element of mystery in there, he would have been terrifying the entire series, as opposed to, okay, like what Kimbra was saying, now I can empathize with him, now I can understand him. You don't necessarily need your reader to understand all of your dark characters. That's a choice that you have to make based on the feel that you're going for. So keep that in mind as you're creating your dark characters, because you can kind of go, it's not that there are only two branches, but currently, in my mind, those are the sort of the two main branches. Either you understand your villain and you understand why he, she, or it is doing what it's doing, or you keep them shrouded in mystery. They're a terrifying force. We have no idea how to defeat them, and that can be especially terrifying for the reader as well as for your main characters.
M. Night Shyamalan does a really good job of that too. Like in a lot of his movies that he does, I'm thinking of like Signs. I don't think you see what the aliens even look like till the very, very end, but he's always like alluding to it, because I feel like our imaginations are going to fill in those spots, and our imaginations might even come up with things that are scarier than he could have come up with initially.
That's a great point. Anything else you'd want to add?
I started out by disagreeing with you because I was thinking about Dexter's origin scene and how much we love that origin scene and how he's still the villain. But you put me in mind actually of Tarantino. He actually did tests for the ear chopping off scene. So the scene where they're in the warehouse and they're taking the ear off, and they shot it Reservoir Dogs. They shot it so that you saw all of that in real time. And then they shot it with the elision, which is what it ended up being in the movie, where the camera just really slowly pans away, and you can hear the ah, but you can't see any of it at all. And it ends up in this, I mean, it's a genius pan because there's nothing. There's a ramp at the edge with an exit that no one can get to. And when they tested it, it tested for this elision, this moving away, the mystery that Ben is talking about, was way, way scarier, and that's what they went with.
So we'll ask a little bit more of a broad question for this one. Put another way, sort of similar in conjunction with the previous question, what makes a character, in your opinion, a dark character? What are some, and it's okay, you can give more than one answer this time. What are some of the hallmark characteristics?
Hallmark characteristics of a villain being dark.
Of just a dark character, yeah.
Hallmark characteristics. I mean, you might like tropes, like you could have some sort of disfiguration, something that they've been through, and maybe whatever they've been through has left them scarred. I feel like other things could be pride or greed. Basically, like you can go down the 7 deadly sins. Yep. Those are great motivations for characters. And then I think a lot of time, have you guys heard the saying that hurt people hurt people?
Yes.
So I feel like a lot of times with characters, like if something has happened to that villain in the past, and then they had a decision where they could try to heal and let it go, or if that corrupted them, that's another way you can go too.
One of my favorite things with bad guys and good guys alike, but mostly bad guys, is that they just don't care. They zero fucks. And so their motivation and everything is not really, it's very spontaneous. And when you have a bad character that doesn't have a pattern and doesn't have a way that they can be tracked down by the good guy, and they can't, it's hard to catch them because they just are off the wall. And I think, you know, if you think about Joker, you never know what the Joker's going to do. And he's just, and insanity pays into it too. But he just doesn't care, and he's more interested in having fun badly and wrongly. And I think that makes him extremely interesting.
So I think that we all live these wonderfully law-abiding, most of us, law-abiding lives. And one of the great pleasures of a dark character is that the superego is either vastly diminished or, as you say, they don't give a fudge. Yes, I managed not to swear. They don't care about the superego, and they are id-driven. So you really want to dive down into, you know, the 4 Fs, but you want to go, of the 4 Fs, you want to go for the negative side. You know, it's fight, flight, food, frolic. So fight and flight are the deep ones where you want to investigate that kind of murky, I am going to do it, and I am actually not going to judge myself for it at all. There is a kind of wonderful release when you know, of course none of us actually want to be Dexter, but is there someone you wish could just disappear?
I think my answer to this question is I like when characters use their talents, their abilities, their skills for evil. Now, I don't like it in the true sense of like our world, because we have too much of that going on, of course. But take Hannibal Lecter, for example, especially from the series, because I just thought that was brilliant. He is hyper intelligent, absolute genius, medical doctor, great cook, and he uses those skills sometimes to help people, but he also obviously uses them to lure and trap and murder his victims, and then he eats them. Spoiler alert. So when a character takes their natural abilities and skills and redirects them in a negative direction, I think that can be a hallmark for me of a dark character. So we're still sort of grappling with the tech issues here, but I think at this point we're ready to open it up for some questions. Oh, you have them going? Excellent, great.
We
So
think, ooh, that's a
Apparently not.
something is working. It's just not me. All right, so yes, walk around to whoever you like and we will answer their questions.
Hi, I really love anti-heroes and morally gray protagonists. Can you guys offer advice if you don't want to do a redemption arc? What are other ways that those characters can grow but continue to be morally gray anti-hero, but also sympathetic?
I like to, and I can't claim this as my own, it belongs to Brandon Sanderson. Brandon has a 3 scale for characters. They have to be either likable, competent. They're likable, competent, or they have agency, or they're active. And so you can make a character likable by your audience if they fulfill at least one of those. And he goes through a whole gamut of different characters on how they fell on that scale. But when you have an anti-hero, if they're an active character, then they're interesting. And you know, your readers are going to like that because they're still involved. They don't have to be a nice person. And then maybe they're competent. Like you said, Hannibal. I mean, he's completely competent. He's a genius. He's a doctor. And so, you know, that makes him interesting.
Next question.
Yeah.
So if you're writing a normal novel and you want to bring in a point of view of the dark character, how much, and this is going to be a general idea, but how much of that point of view would you actually bring into the book? Would it be 0, 10%? You don't want to overwhelm the other characters.
First of all, how dare you, sir? I'm just kidding. No. Give me a little bit more. When you say a normal novel, what genre? Give me a genre. Science fiction. Yeah.
And how much do you put into the bad guy?
How much do you put into the bad guy in like?
So sorry. So it's a science fiction's the genre. It's
Yeah.
the hero journey.
Yeah.
And what percent would you say? And it could be 0. I mean, I don't know. You could view the villain from the hero's perspective, and maybe the answer is it depends. I don't know.
Sure, and I do think the answer is it depends, and everybody else will have a chance to respond too. But for me, I think it goes back to that element of mystery that I was saying. Do you want the character, the antagonist, to be understood, or do you want him or her or it to be a dark, foreboding presence that we really don't understand, and it's just kind of there and wrecking things for the protagonist and beyond? So it depends on, in my opinion, it depends on which approach you want to take. And some of that, of course, is going to fall under whether or not you're giving your target audience what they expect and what they want for your genre conventions. Because sci-fi is a big umbrella, and within sci-fi there are obviously a lot of different subgenres, and the rules can vary from subgenre to subgenre. Any other thoughts along those lines?
So I'm innumerate, and I just make numbers up, but you did ask for numbers. So look at Aliens, for example. In Aliens, you've got a completely amoral villain, and all we know is that they wish to obliterate everybody who is not them. So that's a very, very high percentage. If you then look at something like of course, I blank on the name, and now I've just lost all my sci-fi credentials. Browncoats, the Reavers. Firefly. Thank you, Firefly. So you know, there's lots where we've got lots of banter and happy stuff and stuff on the ship, but we've got the Reavers out there, and they are about as dark as any dark characters that you could ever think of, and they're a much, much smaller percentage. So it's going to depend a lot on your readership. It's going to depend on, in both of those cases, how much horror they can deal with, and it's going to be you knowing who you're writing for.
What about the dark, no fucks given hero? character that is not the villain who's driving the story, and they might be morally questionable, but they are actually the hero arc of the story. Can you give us ways to maybe connect that better with the reader and make that clear when we're doing like our blurbs or when we're setting up advertising and promotion of those stories?
I suck at advertising and promotion, so I'm going to let everybody else answer this.
When I think of a character like that, I think of kind of like maybe a Wolverine or maybe like a John Wick, where there's a high body count. John Wick is a good guy, but like when he's on a rampage, like it doesn't really matter who's getting in his way. He's just taking people down. The Punisher, Wolverine, all the same thing. So were you asking how to then write like either a blurb or like how to advertise that type of hero?
Yes.
So a lot of times in blurb writing, I'll relate what I'm writing to something else that's well known. So it'll be like John Wick and Terminator had a love child. So you can have like two ideas of like well-known IPs that people can relate to, or it could be, you know, like the fun of Firefly meets the horror of Aliens. So you can get two ideas that people know and then kind of put your spin on it if you're writing blurbs.
What's the difference between the bad character and the evil character?
I think it comes down to motivation and potentially other character attributes. A bad character could just be doing bad things and maybe not have any real reason behind it. Alternatively, and I feel like an evil character is one who is doing bad things because, as Kate mentioned, they think they're right. They think what they're doing is right in their twisted worldview. Or they're a highly motivated person and they have a goal that they want to achieve. So I think evil versus bad, we've all done bad things, but only I am evil in this room. So I really think it depends on your motivation and how others perceive you as well also factors into that. Whose point of view are we reading this story from or this scene from? Because if you're in the villain's head and if you're writing from the villain's perspective, they're right. They believe in what they're doing. Even if they know it's wrong, their reasons for doing it are right, which is eerily similar to an anti-hero. They're doing bad things, but for a good purpose. And so it's really just a matter of perspective to some extent. So I don't know if that really answered the question, but any other panelists want to jump in, or am I on my own here?
So going again back to the aliens analogy, right? I feel like the aliens are evil, right? There's no like trying to sit down with them at the counter and barter. There's no like, hey, we just don't understand each other. Let's go grab a coffee or something like that. Like there's no talking it out with them, right? So, and then to use your example again, we'll go back to Loki. So when we first meet Loki, he's not evil, he's bad, he's doing bad things, but then we get to understand him and walk with his journey along the way and see him grow and develop.
Great. I have two questions. One's very general and one is a little bit more specific. What is your advice for someone who is new to writing darker characters? And my second was, what is your advice for someone who is doing a reverse redemption arc where the character is descending into darkness?
For your second question, I just love that. I think that's fantastic. I have a character in one of my series that just came out, a young adult fantasy series, where the character definitely, he's not the main character, but he's like kind of the sidekick, and he's kind of a foil to the main character, and he definitely has a reverse redemption arc, and it's a beautiful thing. Keep it gradual. There's got to be flare-ups, there's got to be signs. You have to signal that this is kind of where it's going, because there's always that hope, of course, within human beings, that hope for redemption. And so if you can lean into that and then totally yank the carpet out from underneath your reader at a certain point where your character's got to make a choice that is somewhat unforgivable, or at least a choice that he, she, it can't come back from, that can really help with that reverse redemption arc. Any further thoughts?
So the hero's journey that you're talking about inverting, the modern novel, you've got a character who starts out with one misbelief, and then that misbelief gets tested and tested and tested. And by the end of the arc, if they have overcome that misbelief, they've changed into someone new, then you're looking at drama or comedy. If they do not overcome their misbelief, they go through change, and it gets worse and worse and worse, you're looking at tragedy. If they do not overcome their misbelief, that is a tragedy at the personal level. For a beginner writer, I would say start reading Grimdark. The Blade itself is a great place to start. There is a really quite excellent group on Facebook that's just called Grimdark, but if you're me, you can call it something else. Because, yes, I've called it Gridmark for 2 years. So Grimdark is a great way, if you're new, to get yourself into how you write characters who their moral compass is set at 0. I would also suggest that you take a look at a really, really terrific, somewhat uneven, but really, really terrific TV show, which is, oh my God, my memory is gone. It's totally gone.
Breaking Bad is a great example of a reverse redemptive arc. So,
in terms of creating a character you understand their motivation, you say that we have to keep enough hidden for the mystery and the suspense and the fear, but what if I had to have the character try to like manipulate or gaslight the main character by appealing to them or showing vulnerable and sympathetic sides? How do I keep him, like, for the fans to not root for him or over sympathize with him or even prefer him to like the main love interest or the main character? Because that seems to be a pitfall that's happening a lot and a lot more with villainous characters in media, where like people prefer them to the main characters and side with them even if they're wrong.
right. I think for me, it's a spectrum. It's how much mystery do you want to have included, at least on that particular spectrum. Do you want them to be in the shadows and mysterious, or do they if they need to be more out front, like what you're describing, then you can't really rely on that mystery as much. I would say the mystery you want to rely on is why are they doing what they're doing. If you don't reveal that, if you don't go deep into who they are and what is making them the way that they are, then it'll help create that sense of foreboding that I had mentioned, and it'll make it hard for your reader to understand why the villain is treating your protagonist the way that they're being treated with all the gaslighting and all the terrible behavior that you just referenced. Any further thoughts on that?
So are you kind of saying as well, like your villain, you want to make sure they're not likable, like the readers don't like side with them? Was that part of it too? Yeah, I was just about to say that actually. I would say like one of the big don'ts in sci-fi and fantasy is killing pets, because nobody likes to see, the cat or the dog die. So if your villain is murdering cats or dogs or whatever, that's a pretty like solid way to make sure that readers are not going to root for that person down the line.
And I'll add that the metaphorical aspect of killing a pet, it doesn't have to be literally killing a pet. It can be killing something. It could be killing someone's dream, something that's really, really important that this is my box and I love my box, and the character takes that box away from the character who owned the box. That's a horrible thing for the character who owned and loved the box, right? So if it doesn't have to be killing a pet per se, it just has to be something bad and something awful. So we've got 1 minute left and we have to do our evil laugh. So we'll do one or maybe two more questions.
Just real quick, as far as the likable bad guy, you can use that to your advantage if you put somewhere in the twist where all of a sudden, how was I taken in by this guy?
Yeah.
But that's an aside. I really, can you get a little more of an example of the misbelief and how that plays? Because I think I kind of get it, but I'm not sure.
So a misbelief is a foundational outlook on the world usually happens to your character when, you know, their origin stories, they're 7 or 8. They want something, so they've got skin in the game. And so we'll just give you an example. So you want a bike for Christmas, and you go in and you say, "Dad, I want a bike." And your dad says, "Shut up!" Because he just had a really, really bad day, and he just found out his wife was cheating, and the world is going to hell. But you're 6, and you know nothing about him. So what you decide in your mind in that moment is, wanting material things is bad. I am bad for wanting stuff. And so you create this story about the meaning of what just happened, and that becomes a foundational misbelief. The misbelief is always about the person. It's always an I am sentence. It's always I am bad for wanting things. So that character, for example, if you had that as their foundational misbelief, they would be bad at accepting gifts. They would be bad at buying stuff for themselves. They would have trouble managing any kind of money or believing that they deserved to get stuff. And their job to overcome that misbelief would be to work through a series of things where you kept giving them stuff until they accepted it. Unless they're a tragic character, in which case they end up just thinking their dad hates them and they don't deserve anything.
Okay, and with that, the session is officially over. So if you all stand up, we will do our evil laugh. And now it's very important for you to throw your head back and laugh at the sky as if mocking God himself. And also because we'll send the COVID up that way instead of at each other. So on the count of 3, we're going to do this, and I will not be doing this into the microphone for your sake. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Well done. Well done. Thank you for coming.